The next speaker is Chris Long. Please help me welcoming Chris to the stage.
So today I'm going to be talking about retention. And not just retention, because there's generally another word that's used along with retention, and that's churn. So retention, churn, they're kind of two sides of the coin. And you're going to hear me talk a little bit about my thoughts, some of my experiences around it. But before I get started really into that, you're going to know a few things about me right away. I like GIFs. You're going to see GIFs all throughout these slides. I actually probably went over the top with them, so my apologies for that. I am Canadian. We do not drink maple syrup out of wine glasses, though I do know a few people who would probably like to do that. I do love maple syrup. When I moved to Amsterdam, we brought probably about 5 liters of maple syrup with us in our luggage, all carefully wrapped just to make sure it survived the trip. I also love beer and coffee, so if you have any recommendations on places to go to here in Kiev, please let me know. This is how I'm doing my sourcing of local guides, is just asking up here on stage. So for the past 5 months, I've been working at Booking.com, helping to build new products and experiences that help to drive the growth of Booking.com. And before that, I was at Shopify for about 4 years, leading the product growth team there, and also helping to build products or experiences that help drive that growth of Shopify. And you're going to hear my thoughts, mostly from Shopify. I'm relatively new at Booking.com, so I really haven't fleshed out my thoughts around it. So you're going to mostly hear my experiences from Shopify throughout this presentation. All right, so here's another GIF. I always include this in every one of my presentations whenever I can. 2 reasons. One, Jurassic Park is absolutely awesome. Also came out 25 years ago, which is absolutely shocking. And 2, it's because you're not going to hear growth hacks. I'm not going to be up here. I'm not going to talk about 10 different ways you can solve churn, 3 different things you can do to fix your retention. I don't have those types of silver bullets right now. What you are going to hear is some different approaches, some different ways of thinking about things that will hopefully help you. And with that in mind, when I was creating this presentation, I came across this quote, and I really, really like it. It's a trap I fall into all the time, is I go into Google, and I type something into Google, and I'm like, how do I measure this A/B test? What is statistically significant in this case? None of those, like the answers I'm getting don't help me. The kind of solutions I find out there on Google, and the blog posts or everything else, don't generally apply to the problems I'm facing. So this quote, I think, sort of covers it. So hopefully today you're going to get different ways of thinking about things, different approaches, but you're not going to get solutions. The solutions you kind of have to figure out on your own. There's also this quote. I really like it as well, because I think in our role, when we're in product and growth and marketing and anything engineering related, we're there to connect different ideas together, and we're there to help sort of let them collide and create something wonderful. So hopefully today, through all the talks you're listening to, the connections you're making with other people, you actually connect a bunch of different ideas that help you solve the problems that you're facing. So when Yaroslav and I were talking and we decided doing a presentation on retention, I went to Google, previous slide, went to Google, looked up something, and I started looking at all the presentations that people have talked about on retention. And it seems like there's a rule out there, which is every retention presentation generally has these guys in it. How many people here know about Yo? Okay, cool. It's about 4 years ago, and it's generally really, really well known for this tweet here. It says 4 days after they launched, they got to 1 million users, and that's with no marketing. That was just them putting it out there and seeing what happens, 1 million users. So I'm curious, I'm like, what's happened with Yo? Where did it go after this? And I know it's been 4 years, it must have got acquired, something else happened. Now, you know what? It's on Patreon right now. You can actually go support Yo if you want to. And the number right here, 35 people are willing to support Yo today. So it went from 1 million people down to 35. So a lot of people will point at Yo, will talk about a leaky bucket, all the holes, all the problems with Yo, all the things they could have done to solve it. But in reality, leaky bucket, there we are. In reality, I don't think about it as a leaky bucket. I actually like to think about it something very different. I like to think about it like this. A very delicate teacup. It's perfectly formed. It can hold water, but you have to be very careful with it. And those 1 million people that came into Yo, it actually was a fire hose filling up that teacup. This is the extent of my Photoshop skills. I was very proud of this when I did it. But there's no way the yo can hold all of that. It's going to overflow, it's going to shatter, all sorts of bad things are going to happen. That's what really came out of it. And the reason why this happened, the reason why I think this happened, is yo's value was telling someone about yo. That's where you got your fun out of yo. I still remember I was at a squash game at 6 a.m. in the morning with a bunch of coworkers. And one guy had yo, he told us about yo, we all installed yo, we all got fun out of it. We went to the office, we told more people about yo, we all got excited about it, we all yo'd with each other. There's a problem with this. And there's only so many people you can share yo with. There's only so many people that care that there's this messaging app out there that all it does is yo. So there's really no chance that yo had of actually solving their retention problem. So there's a little story about yo. Did the required retention presentation, part of that. Now we're going to get to the meat of it. Now this is probably the core idea I really want to get across with my presentation. And it's this. Churn rate doesn't matter. It's only going to drive you crazy. It's not something you should be actively really thinking about. It's definitely something you should watch, but don't actively think about it. So this is kind of the reaction I was hoping for. Not really getting it. So we can try it again, but let's keep going. Two main reasons why churn rate doesn't matter, why you shouldn't be thinking about it. It's a lagging metric. It came up earlier today about churn rate being a lagging metric, and it's absolutely true. It has you looking in the past. It has you looking what happened a month ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, when you really should be thinking about the future, looking forward into what's going to happen. You don't want to be focused on the past. This is also something that we don't talk about often enough, is the idea of averages. We are really fixated on average numbers in our industry. If you get a chance, there's a great video called The Myth of the Average. Highly recommend you watch it. Average hides the spread. It hides the outliers of people. So when you look at churn rate, you're going to get that average churn rate. The thing you're going to miss is there might be this segment of customers that loves your product and sticking around, and that's who you need to focus in on. So by just looking at churn rate just on its own, you're only going to get an average. It's a trap that you need to be very careful about. So core of this whole thing, focusing on churn won't solve churn. Looking at churn rate, you won't solve your problems. It's not what you should be thinking about. Instead, I'm going to share what I think is the secret of retention and solving churn. It's building a product that continuously delivers value. And the key word in this sentence is continuously. You need to keep on delivering value, and if you do that, you're going to solve your retention. You're going to keep your customers around. So I'm going to get the question probably, what is value? What exactly do I mean by this ambiguous term, value? So in the case of something like Facebook, it's the social connections you're making. It's the time you spend on the product. It's the value you get from all those connections, seeing what other people are doing. It could be Tesla. It's the safety, the environmental impact that you're having. Maybe it's a status symbol because you got this beautiful red car driving around. And it might be showing my age here, but it might be the N64 game system with GoldenEye. It's the fun and the enjoyment that you're getting out of it. In the case of Shopify, it's this sound. We're going to get it playing? Ah, okay, that's right. That's a cha-ching noise. It's purposely designed to remind you when you get value. So anyone has a Shopify store, if you have the mobile app installed, you get a sale, you hear that cha-ching noise that you didn't hear now, but just imagine. And the idea behind it was like, I actually remember when Craig Miller, he's now head of product, but he was head of marketing back then, he came up with this idea. He's like, you're out at a bar, you have your phone out, makes a cha-ching noise, all your friends are going to ask, what was that? You're going to say, I just got a sale. Isn't that exciting? I'm going to buy the next round of drinks. That's what we're trying to get across with that moment. So I said I like GIFs. I also like charts. So I'm going to explain the next few concepts using charts. And this isn't the only time you're going to see charts. So we got value on one axis here, and we got time on the other axis. We're going to draw this line here. And this line represents the likely to churn threshold. So this is the point at which people, if they drop below it, will probably churn. Makes sense. So the first thing you have is onboarding. So how do you get people above that line? How do you get people to actually get above that line and stick around for your product? So in the case of Shopify, it was about getting your first sale. And that was what we really focused in on when it came to onboarding. It didn't matter if you were using our product for months. You were likely to churn if you hadn't yet made that first sale. So these are the emails. This is probably about a year and a half old. This is going back to my experience, so they're probably very different now, but I'm going to explain some of the concepts behind the email. So all these emails are purposely designed to help getting you to that point of first sale. And there's two concepts I want to call out with these emails. The first, when it comes to onboarding, is this idea of constantly repeating yourself. So I'm way back when, used to be a developer, went to school for computer science, and you're constantly taught this idea of the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. That's how you program, that's how you code. When it comes to marketing, onboarding, even product, you need to constantly repeat yourself. You need to change how you repeat about yourself. So if we take a look at those emails, how exactly is that reflected? So we have this one email here that talks about interactive training, setting up your Shopify store. And it links to a page that might look something along these lines. If we look at the course material for that, you're going to see it actually kind of replicates what are the emails that are being sent out. It's in a video format. It's someone talking to you instead of an email you read or articles you link off to. It's also when you log into your Shopify store, you're going to see these steps outlined there. It's a different format, different messaging, different way of getting across. But that's the important thing with onboarding. Like, you can't just send, and Baron spoke about this, you can't just send one message out to people and just expect them to understand and read it. You have a whole bunch of different people in your audience, and you need to think about how exactly to position it to all of them and keep repeating yourself to them. The other important thing with those emails that we're sending out is the idea you need to remove barriers and roadblocks. You need to help, like, there's roadblocks in the way of someone actually getting to that point and making a first sale, and you need to remove them. So with Shopify, we always constantly talk about the idea of entrepreneurs. We don't want people to come to Shopify just to open an online store. We want you to come if you want to be an entrepreneur. But there's a problem. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you might not have something to sell, which is that roadblock. Like, if you have nothing to sell, you're never going to get to your point of first sale. And that's what that email there is. Don't have products to sell. And it can link off to a page that maybe looks like find products to sell through a Burlo, a blog post, a guide, all sorts of different things like that. So when you look at your onboarding, try to figure out those areas where you're getting people in and they have those roadblocks. They're motivated to use your software, but they might not necessarily be there or able to use your software because of some roadblock. And it might be within your control to actually solve it. So that's onboarding. Now we move on to this ongoing. So once you got someone on your product, how do you keep them around? And this is probably the more important part about it. And the number one way that I figured out to make this happen is associate your revenue and make it directly proportional to your value directly proportional to your revenue. So as your value goes up, as your customers get more value, you're going to make more money. So with Shopify, we actually have, there's this gross merchandise volume, and that's a metric that's talked about constantly. And that's the idea of the total amount of sales that's happening on the Shopify platform. Or if you look at the pricing plan with Shopify, the actual language that's used on each one of these tiers, everything from a new business, growing business, and advanced features for scaling your business. So as you go up in revenue, Shopify expects you to pay more money for each one of those tiers, and the features associated with it correspond to that. Or it could be with Shopify payments, where you're actually charging a percentage fee of the revenue your customers are making. So you're directly tied to it. And what this does is this actually means Shopify is really invested in the success of the customers, and those customers continue to get more sales and keep on getting more value from the product. So here, this is from the 2017 earnings report with Shopify, and you can sort of see here the growth of, as they start to shift a lot of their focus much more to this idea of we want to actually make money as our customers make money, and that growth is constantly happening there. The other important part about this with value associated with revenue, it doesn't necessarily need to be, push the wrong button there, it doesn't necessarily need to be the customer who's paying for it. So in the case of Facebook, the customer is us. It's us, the people who are using Facebook and getting pleasure from it and joy from it. That's the value it's providing. But the revenue it makes is from the ads. And that's someone else who's paying it. Probably actually most people in this room are also paying for those ads. But that's where that revenue comes from. So you don't need to make money from your customers directly, but you need to be associated with that value. So Facebook, they can't sell ads if they don't have people using the platform. Okay. So that's sort of a good picture of value versus time. But there's a bit more to the story that I want to talk about. Some stuff that I've been thinking about recently, I'm going to share it here. And this is something that I've only really started thinking about in the past few months. So you're getting sort of a sneak peek of some of my thoughts. I sort of started with a bar. So I said I like beer. So one of the first things when I moved to Amsterdam was start to explore various bars around the city. Walked into this one a few weeks after I came, and now I'm there probably about twice a week. And it's not because like they have an amazing beer selection or anything else along those lines. It's actually because of this guy behind the bar. This guy, he's a Belgian, really loves great service. You walk into the bar, you get a glass of water, it comes out of the Heineken tap, which is actually amazing for those of us who like really good beer. You always joke Heineken's water. Well, he actually made it water. But he always greets you with a handshake. He always smiles at you, knows all the stuff that you have going on. He's built a relationship with me and with all the other people who go there. And that's the idea. That's what I got to start thinking about is how do you build a relationship with your customer? It's because that's what you really want. Like if you're in a relationship with your customer and it's mutual, then that's actually like, you're not going to leave that relationship. So how do we do that? So I went to the library. I didn't actually go to the library. I sat down for lunch with a consumer psychologist at Booking.com. Spoke to him about this and was like, what are your thoughts around this? And he pointed me at a paper called the Relationship Investment Model, which is up here, was built in the 1980s. It's one of those models that seems so simple. You're like, okay, people actually publish papers about this, but the idea you got satisfaction. So are your needs being met in the relationship? You have the quality of alternatives. Are there other people who do a better job meeting your needs? And you got relationship investment. How much do you stand to lose? So this is all designed around interpersonal relationships. So you can imagine the investment in this case might be the mortgage on your house, your shared bank account, something else along those lines. And all those add up to this idea of like, what is the commitment level that you have, and what is that likelihood of you actually sticking around the relationship? So we can modify this model. And when we spoke, sir, about value, I think that fits under the idea of satisfaction there. And we have quality of alternatives. I think that makes sense. It's all your competitors that are out there. But investment, that's the one I want to dig into. But all these add up and minus up to commitment, which gives you the idea of the probability someone will continue with your product. So I said, what is the idea of investment? So I've been giving this a little bit of thought. I think it comes down to something along these lines. This is my Gmail account. I got 150,000 emails in my Gmail account. Probably 99.9% of them are junk I don't give a shit about. But 0.1% of those I actually care about, and I'm not going to go to the effort of trying to move my Gmail to anything else. I've looked into it, like with all this stuff about Google reading your email, things along those lines. I'm like, maybe I'll move. But then it comes down to this number. I'm like, no, too much effort. It's actually at the point where if Google was to like, we're not providing a free service, I'm willing to pay to keep this. It's this video game here. This is Clash Royale. How many people have heard of Clash Royale? Okay. If you haven't, I recommend you install it. It is like the perfect example of every single gamification technique that is out there. And this screenshot kind of like shows it. You've got your level number 11. You've got gold coins, diamonds. You have treasure chests. You have all sorts of things. But when I got this game, I was like, oh, I'm just going to play it just to understand some of these tactics that are being used. I actually, like, it hurt to uninstall it because I worked so hard to get to that point. I like built up all these cards. I had scores. I had coins, everything else. I had a huge level of investment that I was losing when I uninstalled it. So you have those two things, but there's one thing that vastly matters more than whether it's the data you've collected, the score, status, or anything else along those lines. That's the time you spend. Time is a finite resource. It's something that you really be cautious about how you might be spending it. So the amount of time you spend in a product really, really matters. So with that in mind, setting up your theme with your Shopify store, key part about the process. But it takes a ridiculous amount of time. So you go to the theme store, you might open it up here. You browse around, there's hundreds of themes varying from free to $200 US, all sorts of different things, features, etc. You have to open up each one of those ones. You have to take a look at it, figure out if you want the blog, if it matches your colors. You might try it out. And at the end of all this, after you spend probably a good chunk of time doing this, you finally get your theme. And it's that time that actually is really important there. And this is an important part because I think there's a shift in the industry, and we talk a lot about frictionless. But what I want to get across with this is frictionless shouldn't be a goal. I love this GIF. Wait for it. There. It's absolutely amazing. He just anyways, walking away. But frictionless shouldn't be a goal. You shouldn't be focusing in on actually making your product frictionless. There's times where that does matter, but there's also times where you want people to spend that time. You actually want them to spend time with your product. And a lot of this comes from the idea of don't make me think. This is the book a lot of designers were pointed at way back when. It's a book I read when I first got started in product and web development. It's good. It's something you want to do. But you need friction to actually turn something that's very mechanical into that mindful act, something that actually matters more to the people who are using your product. And there's even a term for this. It's called the IKEA Effect. And there's been arguments whether this is true or not, but the IKEA Effect is this cognitive bias in which consumers place a higher value on the products that they build. And you see this, like anyone who does if you make your own dinner, make cookies, you appreciate those cookies a lot more than if you just went out and bought them. This is the kind of effect you want to create with your products. You want to drive up that investment, and you want people to spend time within your product and doing things there. So with a lot of relationships, at some point, that relationship may end. It's something you need to be somewhat okay with. So this is How I Met Your Mother. It's a great TV show. So a little story as well about this, talking about my move to Amsterdam. So when I moved to Amsterdam, I went to cancel my cell phone plan back home in Canada. I go online, and I search for how to cancel your cell phone plan, expecting it just to be a simple click of the button. That wasn't the case. I had to call this phone number. I had to speak to one person who I had to explain, yes, I am moving to Netherlands. I'm living there right now. I don't need my cell phone plan anymore. They're like, okay, that's great. Let me transfer you. They transferred me to the retention department. The retention department's like, I can offer you a great deal if you stay with us. I'm like, I'm in Amsterdam. You don't offer me, there's no value in that. After all this, the whole process, it took actually about 45 minutes, an hour. It kind of felt like this. And this is the danger you run into if you focus on churn rate. You're going to create a product like this. You're going to end up like one of those telco companies. I'm not sure if the process is easier or harder here, but back home, this is what you expect. And the reason why this happens, why the relationship will end at some point, is two things. One, your customers are changing. I moved halfway across the world. I'm changing in a lot of different ways. Your customers might be shifting, maybe changing what exactly the business is that they're doing. They're going to be changing in all sorts of different ways. And your product is also changing in all sorts of different ways. You're going to redesign it. You're going to maybe shut down a few features, relaunch a few other features. Maybe it's a feature that you didn't think anyone was using, but was key to someone's business. Your product is constantly changing. If both those things are changing, there's a truth to that. At some point, they may not be in sync anymore. This is important. So the relationship will end. It's because they're not in sync. And I think a problem or reason why this happens is we generally draw a diagram like this. And we're like, here's our customers right now. Here's the addressable market. All we need to do is build more features. We can expand this circle. That's not actually the case. It's actually something like this, where you've got market A, B, C, D, a whole bunch of different markets. And your customers are here. You kind of created a blob. It's not a nice, pretty circle. It's a blob. And what ends up happening, some of your customers from market C might move away and do something else. That's okay. You just need to be aware that happened, move on from it. It could be you shifted your priorities. So now you focused in on, in this case, market B. But you focused in on market B here instead and started to think about more about that. And you left market C behind. And with this, I think it comes we're all working in relatively small companies, probably, or medium-sized companies, even large companies. There's always limited resources. You have to focus in on a few segments, and you have to actually figure out what your priorities are. And you have to be okay when that shifts around and your customers leave. So as an example of this, talking about Shopify, in 2013, this is going back to before I started at Shopify, but there's articles like this. I actually remember going in for my interview at Shopify, and they're like, have you used us? And I'm like, yes. But I created my online store on BigCommerce. It's because I had more features I needed, which is one of our competitors. But Shopify was known for being best for small stores, fewer products. Magento, one of the competitors out there, best for large online sellers, lots of products. And you can kind of draw it linearly like this. So you had Etsy, Shopify right there, Magento, Demandware. Now what ended up happening was a lot of people were growing on Shopify. They started with us, they would grow, and then they would need something more, something that we couldn't exactly provide. So we could have maybe shifted our resources around, thinned them out a little bit, actually built out market, but we would have built a shittier product for everyone. We wouldn't have actually solved anyone's needs. We could have also moved up market, so just take our resources we have and instead just build features upwards and leave those guys down behind on the far end behind. But that wasn't what Shopify was about. We wanted to focus on entrepreneurs, and we firmly believe that creating those entrepreneurs is really, really important. So what Shopify did instead was it focused in on that market, and it said, this is what we're going to do, and if you need to leave our platform because we're too small for you, that's okay. And it got to a point where it had enough resources to actually start building out something like Shopify Plus, which is actually focused on taking on Magento, Demandware, and all these other people. It got to that point where it was actually had enough resources to make that happen. So way back when, used to be a software developer, then moved into product management. And then when I joined Shopify, it was my first time actually doing any marketing. So I've had a few years' experiences doing marketing, and now I'm back on product management. But there's one lesson that stuck at my time at Shopify, and it's important because that role of being in product as well as marketing makes it much more relevant. Now, this isn't actually entirely true, but it's somewhat that marketing is easier than building a product. Marketing's still hard, but it's definitely easier. You can go out there, there's all sorts of different things you can do, all sorts of different tactics that you can do to drive some more people to come to your website. And what I've seen a lot of times come up is you come across a new market, you come across a new spot, and you're like, I hit gold. Like, this is amazing. We've got all these people coming in. This is absolutely brilliant. Like, I've discovered the new way for our business to grow. And then you look at the chart, and maybe it's something along these lines, just drops down to 0. And you're like, well, that didn't work out. That's just absolute fake, just garbage. It's not the way to think about it in these cases. Instead, think about it kind of like the idea of the lean startup. Like, this is almost along the lines of what Buffer is well known for doing. Like, they started with a website, you click on a button, it would say, hey, we're not ready yet, but enter your email. What you just did is maybe validated that there's a new market out there. Now, it might not be something that you have the resources to prioritize, but you need to build a feedback loop with your product team, help them understand that newly discovered market, and maybe they can actually build something for it. Like, you're helping them sort of discover new ways to use the product to build it out. So just in conclusion right now, churn rate, it doesn't matter. Look at the numbers, consider what exactly it means. Definitely think about it when it comes to product market fit, but it's a lagging metric and it shows averages. Find some other metric that's forward facing. Think about how to build relationships with your customers, how to give them value, and how to actually create that investment. One thing I didn't discuss, but something to think about, is how do you give that investment back to them too, that they feel you're equally invested in them. And at some point, your customer might leave your product, or you might leave your customer, and you need to be okay with that. That's something that's perfectly fine. So thank you very much. Yes, that worked.
Perfect. I was actually, do you have my mic? I was actually thinking of my attempts to unsubscribe from Adobe Creative Cloud when you were mentioning this case. Do we have any questions?
Hi. So I wanted to ask about some of your recent developments within the product. I know that you just stepped into augmented reality. Like, what is the general feedback from the market? How is it going? Thank you.
I haven't actually personally really stepped into augmented reality. A lot of stuff I'm focused in is more other new product stuff. I don't know, I guess with augmented reality, it's interesting, still is somewhat gimmicky, but that's just purely a high-level viewpoint on it, but definitely would be interested. If it's something you're curious about, I love talking about it and would definitely be interested in talking more about it.
Hey. How did you work with relationship building when you work in Shopify? You use only email marketing on some messengers, or every customer has her own manager and he communicates with him? And how do you show that revenue which customer will get from using Shopify?
So when it comes to the relationship side of things, with most Shopify customers, we don't actually have that account management side of things. There's 600,000 plus now Shopify customers. If you're at Shopify Plus, you do get that account management. With the Shopify level, it's more through things like customer support, it's the actual product itself, it's maybe the time you spent on it, and the reminder of how much time or investment you put into that product helps to build that relationship. So that relationship, it's more of a model rather than just a direct, like you have a one-to-one with them. But you want to sort of leverage the idea of what we're talking about with relationships and try to create a product that leverages those concepts of value, investment, and quality of alternatives.
Plain simple question, what's your value point at Booking.com?
So with Booking.com, not actually sure what the official line is. For me, it's about travel. So it's about making the world more accessible to people, potentially through price point, finding the place that they want to stay at. There's a bunch of different ways that we can present it, but it's really the idea about getting people out there and experiencing the world is the main thing that we're focused in on.
Hi. How do you choose which features you want to input into the product? So let's say there's feature 1, there's feature 2, there's feature 3, and then you have different departments who have different thoughts on which features should be implemented. So how do you justify that this is a good fit for your future strategy, or this can increase your revenue in the future?
With something along those lines, like those cases, like if I think about a situation where I'm at right now with trying to make some of those decisions, you're going to look at what are the quantitative metrics that you have that are a good indicator this is something we should do. So it might be people who use the current feature as it stands today. And if you don't have that information, you maybe do something like the lean startup, which is put a button in your website or on your product and gather how many people are interested in it. You're also going to get qualitative feedback to actually tell, like people can say how much they want this feature. Those two things hopefully will help give you a good idea that will hopefully tie into something like what was showed about Skyscanner that shows you the total transaction volume. Like for them, they had this tool that helped to calculate what exactly that value is. You might not have that, but if you can come up with some of those cases around it and help to compare apples and apples rather than apples, oranges, and I don't know, cookies, which is what a lot of those comparisons come down to. So figure out like what are the ways that you can actually compare the right metrics associated with them.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's really awesome and very relevant to our startup. And my question will be about the retention, because you have mentioned that like churn happens, and yeah, that's true. And I do agree that you don't have to like be worried about every customer that churned, but still, like how did you deal with retention with Shopify? And how did you know that, for example, there is no match between the customer and you, not that there is something wrong with the product?
So still do this, like plug the leaks that you can plug that makes sense to plug. So a simple example of that is just like updating your credit card. Like that's a reason why people do churn. And there's all sorts of systems in place that you can help to do that. So I'm not saying totally ignore it, but definitely do some stuff associated with it. One of the main things we did at Shopify was we just asked people why they're churning. Why are they canceling their cell phone plan at the end of the entire process? And we also provided certain like advice or tips or certain things. So if you said you're churning because I don't know, you couldn't find a domain that matched, we'd say, well, hey, here's a domain generator tool that you can go to and use it. Like we'd provide those kind of paths to people, and those reasons actually helped us understand what are the kind of thing, where are our customers churning from, like what are the reasons why they're churning. It's a useful tool for us to have. We'd also do proactive outreach, so when someone churned, they get added to a list, and if a support person was free, they would actually pick up the phone and call them and have a conversation with them and see if they can actually solve that problem that they ran into. So don't ignore entirely. Still ask why people are churning, but don't make that a primary focus. Still a wealth of information there, but if you focus entirely on it, you're going to get stuck.
Hello. My question is pretty connected to the previous. In terms of retention, it seems that it's a responsibility of the whole company and of many departments. Many departments can influence the retention with the value that is created by product, by marketing relations, that created is by customer success also. So how do you share this responsibility for retention across departments? And in terms of KPIs or OKRs, how is it possible to measure who influence this retention and whose responsibility is it?
Yeah, so I think it's not everyone's responsibility is to build a product that provides value to your customers. And if you do that, you're going to get growth and you're going to get retention, hopefully as a result of that. So what you want to do when you talk about OKRs isn't say we're going to solve retention, but it's going to be saying we're going to be adding value in these ways. So in the case of Shopify, two things we always spoke about a lot when it came to value. especially within my team, was the value. We want to make people sales. We want to make them money. And another one was we want to save them money. So it might be like we make a process more efficient for them, or we built a product like Shopify shipping that saves them on shipping costs. But that's what we focused something like the OKRs on, is more how do we measure the value we're delivering to our customers? And then coming out of that, hopefully, is customers that stick around with us. If customers aren't sticking around with us and we have measured what we think is value, then that's a problem, and we need to go back to what we think is actually what makes our product valuable to them.
Yep. Thank you very much.